Even the folks that cover college football at the SEC level can't help but notice Cam Coleman.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Slightly different type show today. It's a crossover. Earlier in the week, I went on Locked On SEC with Locked On SEC host Chris Gordy. We'll jump into that conversation in just a moment, but it just stands out. To me, the thing that stands out is even folks like Chris that cover Auburn from the SEC level, they can't stop thinking about Cam Coleman.
Look, we want to start with Auburn because they were one of the first teams to hit the practice field. They've already got a couple practices under their belt. Zach, welcome in, man. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it was a little bit of a tease. Auburn starts spring practice. We're all excited. Yes, football's back on the plains. They go out and practice twice, Gordy. Now they got a week off because of spring break.
Before I get to, well, I guess we'll start here. I mean, just last week, like we said, Auburn starts up football practice. It is a big year for Hugh Freeze. He heads into year 2 on the Plains.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into all of it, the quarterback, the new coordinators, all of it. But I think we got to start here. The stud signee, 5-star wide receiver Cam Coleman, 24/7 Sports Composite had him as the number 5 overall player in the nation.
Yeah.
And Zach, I saw all the pictures everybody put out there. I mean, from the first day on the practice field, this kid looms over everybody. He looks like the real deal. So the question is he the real deal already?
He is the real deal. He passes the eye test. He doesn't look like a true freshman, doesn't look like a teenager, looks like a grown man. I mean, guys who are built like that, as you can see, like they shouldn't be able to move the way that he moves. And his catch radius is tremendous. On today's episode of Locked On Auburn, I talked to one of the Auburn quarterbacks, Hank Brown. I'm like, how good is this guy? And he's special. He's special. Quarterbacks love having him as an option out there. But, I mean, really, I think the potential impact of Cam Coleman, and we'll see what his total yards are as a freshman. You know, I don't think he's a 1,000-yard receiver as a freshman, Gordy. But I do think it fixes something that Auburn has had issues with for really probably since before Gus Malzahn, maybe even back to the later part of the Tuberville era, where Auburn's had a bunch of number 2 and number 3 wide receivers. And it's like, if they could just get that dude who allows everybody to kind of slot down a spot to where they're in their proper roles of the offense, everybody would perform a little bit better. Well, they have their wide receiver 1 right now. Talking to multiple sources, he started out with the 2s last week, which is fine. I don't think any of us expect that to be the way it is by the end of spring. But yeah, Cam Coleman, a sight to behold, Chris Gordy at Auburn.
Yeah, and it's just funny. I mean, outside of even, I know you're out there, but all the Auburn media I saw on social media, I mean, everybody was taking a picture of this kid. And,
the difference is substantial, Gordy. Like, it is a noticeable Auburn. I keep saying this, and I think people get annoyed, but like Auburn's never had somebody like Cam Coleman at wide receiver.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think, because I mean they've had some good wide receivers, over the years, guys who've made it to the league, and Slayton, I guess, the most recent, but like
Amy Coates before that, I guess.
Yeah, but like a guy who's that dude, and to your point, like you say he doesn't have to have 1,000-yard receiving year. I mean, it's been a while since Auburn's had that. I'm going back and looking through the recent years. I mean, last year their leading receiver was a tight end in Fairweather, and he didn't even break 400 yards. So if this kid has 500 yards, that's a huge leap forward.
100%. Especially, I mean, that's kind of the assumption of what this offense is going to look like. A lot of balance, a lot of different guys that can do different things, which is nice. In the past, Auburn's had a bunch of solid receivers, but they've all been slot guys. Or there was this issue when Gus Malzahn was here where they didn't want to put Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz on the field at the same time because they played the same position. It's like, it's wide receiver. What do you mean? Put multiple guys on the field at the same time. So yeah, I think Hugh Freeze style of offense, they want to play with tempo. They want to make you defend every single blade of grass and really spread you out. I think Cam Coleman's impact on this team could be huge. Rivaldo Fairweather, like you said, led Auburn in both catches and yards a year ago. He's coming back. He's going to be a big part of what they do, as well as the transfer that they went out and got Robert Lewis from Georgia State. And then other true freshman wide receivers. Perry Thompson, fellow 5-star. He's not here yet. He's not getting here till the summer. Bryce Cain's a 4-star slot guy who's already impressed folks early on in spring camp. And then Malcolm Simmons, he gets here in the fall or in the summer as well. So lot to like about the future of Auburn's receiving room.
Any of those guys, those other guys on the roster, that were there last year can take a big step forward. I'm thinking Caleb Burton obviously transferred in, Jay Fair. I mean, can one of those guys, I guess one of those guys is going to have to step up.
Yeah, right now it seems like it is Caleb Burton. And there was kind of a lot of conversation of, okay, well, how do they use Caleb Burton? Do they see him as a slot guy or an outside guy? In the bowl game, he pretty much exclusively played an outside wide receiver. That seems to be the way the majority of his reps were, based off of the folks that I talked to over those first 2 spring practices, kind of see him as an outside wide receiver. I'm predicting by the end of spring, Cam Coleman will be the main guy on one outside option, and then I think Caleb Burton will be the other, and we'll see what happens when Perry Thompson gets here in the summer. So, yeah, Caleb Burton, the former Ohio State Buckeye, kind of took him about half of a season to kind of get going in this offense, but they like him. They like Caleb Burton. And you mentioned Jay Fair. Jay Fair, when the new Auburn roster update came out, we all love to see, like, okay, who gained weight, who grew a few inches and all that. Jay Fair lost, like, I think it was 18 pounds. I'm not exaggerating. I think it was actually 18 pounds, but I think he got the flu or something. So kind of curious to see what his recovery looks like and how he's able to kind of bounce back. And so I think Jay Fair and Caleb Burton are definitely the 2 guys to watch as far as returning wide receivers.
As we know, wide receivers a lot of times are only as good as the guy getting them the football. So let's hit on the other big question for Auburn. All eyes are on Peyton Thorne. Obviously, he was the big acquisition of last offseason, comes in through the transfer portal, had some nice games, a nice career at Michigan State, and we just never saw that, step forward at Auburn this past year. Almost felt like a step backward in progress at the quarterback spot. They didn't really bring anybody in through the portal. Thought they may go snag a starter from another roster or whatever, but is there any realistic possibility? I know they say it's an open competition, but Hank Brown, Holden Garrett, or Walker White, is this thing really wide open, or is this Peyton Thorne's job?
Well, I'll quote Hugh Freeze when he spoke to the media this past Thursday. He said it was Peyton's job to lose. And it's like, okay, that's kind of what the feel was. Peyton Thorne's so interesting because I guess the Auburn fan base is split into 2 ways. And I wouldn't say it's split down the middle, but I do think there's 2 groups for sure. And one is the positive, the pro Peyton, where it's like, well, he didn't go through spring last year. And I do agree that going through spring is important, especially for a quarterback. I think it's crucial. And so he missed that. He went through spring at Michigan State, entered the portal afterwards after he graduated, and obviously wound up in Auburn over the summer, and then kind of got his first live reps in the fall. I think him going through spring is going to be huge. The other side of the Auburn fan base is, oh, well, he stinks. He can't do anything. And I don't think Peyton stinks. I don't think Peyton Thorne was put into a situation to succeed a year ago at Auburn. And so what do? I think they make the situation for whoever Auburn's quarterback is better. I think it's going to be easier to succeed at quarterback at Auburn this year than it was a year ago, regardless of if it's Peyton, if it's Hank, if it's Holden, if it's Walker. You go out and get Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson and Bryce Cain and Malcolm Simmons. You go out and get a Robert Lewis. You bring Rivaldo Fairweather back. You beef up your offensive line and go out and get Percy Lewis from Mississippi State. Whoever is Auburn's quarterback, which I think it will be Peyton Thorne, it's going to be easier to succeed at Auburn in 2024 than it was in 2023. The situation's way better.
Yeah, I just can't imagine, Hugh Freeze banking his career on, this guy, like if it goes south this year and they finish sub 500 and miss a bowl game, like we'll look back and go, God, Hugh Freeze hitched his wagon those first 2 years on Peyton Thorne. And again, for his sake, for Auburn fans' sake, the hope is that light comes on. We see that Thorne that was so good. I went back and watched some film. Like, he had games at Michigan State where you're like, wow, he is awesome. So, here's hoping we see that. Real quick before we close the quarterback talk, Zach, is there just like odds percentage, whatever, is there a guy that you think they would grab through the portal post-spring, or is that door kind of closed?
I think it's closed. If they were going to do it, they would have done it in December, and they may have tried to. There were a lot of reports out there that it seemed like they tried to. But no, if they were going to do it, it would be then. We talked to Hugh Freeze when he was down in Mobile watching the Auburn Tigers play and participate in Senior Bowl practices. We talked to him before he went in. And he was asked about quarterbacks, as he will be for every presser for the rest of his time here at Auburn. And he said he wants to build it through the high school ranks, which means Hank Brown and Walker White are probably the guys after Peyton Thorne. We'll see what happens with Holden Geriner, but the future of the quarterback position, I think, is solid. I think both Hank and Walker can be really, really solid SEC quarterbacks. I think they both do different things, but I think they do them well. And no, I'd have a hard time seeing them go out and get a quarterback as the way it currently sits. Now, if we have some surprise leaves or some some injuries or things like that, I do think that could happen, but something drastic would have to change for me to think that they would go out and get a transfer quarterback over the summer.
This is a crossover edition, Locked On SEC, Locked On Auburn. He's Zach Blackerby, Chris Gordy here with you. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Coming up next, we will get into a little conversation on some of the guys Auburn's added through the transfer portal. Who could be the most significant guys to add on that side of things? We'll touch on that in just a second.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live events to highlights of games, in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers an amazing viewing experience with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can just plug into your TV and essentially makes any TV a smart TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos of your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes the Locked On Fire TV channel. So be sure to check all of that out, whether it's, that basketball tournament that's coming up, the NBA, the MLB, and a ton more, not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos. They've got it all. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Today's show also brought to you by our friends at Alumni Hall. If you are an everydayer, we love and only buy Auburn gear from Alumni Hall. They've got you covered. Doesn't matter what the sport is. And obviously with Auburn, it's football 24/7, all around the corner or all around the calendar. But we've got basketball that is peaking. It's March, baby. Let's go. Make sure you've got all of your basketball swag ready to rock and roll for the tournaments that are coming up, as well as baseball. Baseball's in full swing, pun intended. Alumni Hall has 3 great physical locations, one in Auburn, one in Opelika, one in Huntsville. Or, friend of the show, regular co-host Daryl Dapprich, he orders his stuff from alumnihall.com. You can do that as well. So be sure to check out our friends at Alumni Hall, the 3 physical locations, or alumnihall.com.
All right, as we dive back into it with our buddy Zach Blackerby, a crossover edition, Locked On SEC, Locked On Auburn. And we're talking all things Auburn, our special preview of spring ball as we're getting set for Auburn's spring game here in just a couple weeks. And Zach, obviously, it's become a huge piece. It used to just be, we talked about recruits and, maybe you got 1 or 2 transfers that came in, they got to sit out a year. But man, this day and age, 9 transfers, at least I counted, coming into Auburn this offseason. We know they killed it in the portal a year ago with a ton of guys. Give me an idea on some of these guys coming in through the portal. Give me a name or 2 you think can make a big, big difference this year.
Yeah, we already talked about Robert Lewis, the wide receiver, former Georgia State guy. Your typical. This is what I envisioned when we talked about what the transfer portal could be. A guy who kills it at a lower level of competition and then getting a chance to move up to the SEC or the Big Ten. This is what Robert Lewis is doing. Been extremely productive at Georgia State. We'll see if he has an opportunity to do so at Auburn. Percy Lewis, the left tackle, coming over from Mississippi State. Guy is massive, and he moves really, really well. I think he could be pretty athletic for his size, so excited to see what Percy Lewis can do for this offense. And then, on the defensive side of the ball, they went out and got Jaron Thompson, a guy who played a lot of safety at Texas last year, and I've heard nothing but good things about him so far. It seems like he's really got it in between the ears, and he's a very physical guy. He's a defensive back that's going to be willing to help out at run support. So excited to see what Jaron Thompson can do from as a potential improbable starting safety. And then at corner, Antonio Kite, going out and getting him from Alabama, a guy who didn't play a ton at Alabama a year ago, but you like his skill set and you like what he can bring at a position of need. And also, I love these transfers, Gordy, where, okay, they can fight to start right away, but also they've got several years of eligibility after that. So those are a few of the guys that really stood out to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because we know how good Auburn's secondary was last year, but you're almost retooling the whole thing. I mean, it's going to be a lot of new faces back there.
Yeah, but I mean, you say that, but you feel good about Kayan Lee, who had to start several games last year because Nehemiah Pritchett missed the first chunk of the season with a lower leg injury. Jaron Thompson's played a bunch of quality football for a team that made the college football playoff. Keontae Scott was arguably your best defensive back, and you've got him coming back. So, sure, I mean, you and I were at Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and when that team was playing, like all the helmets in the defensive backfield, they were wearing Auburn helmets, it seemed like, but you're right. I mean, you can't just replace DJ James and Jalen Simpson and Nehemiah Pritchett. Absolutely. But I think they did a pretty good job of getting as close as you possibly could to doing it. So look, they like a lot of these younger guys too. A true freshman in the defensive back room to look out for is Jalen Crawford. When Cam Coleman was down, in Orlando competing with all the other top recruits in high school football, and he was just a human highlight reel down there, the guy that kind of stymied him the best and covered him the best was Jalen Crawford. And so just another guy to kind of keep eyes on. I think he could come in and compete very, very early at corner.
What about on the D line? I know a Kentucky friend who swears by Gage or Kansas friends rather, who swears by Gage Keys says,
you have Kansas friends?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I don't think he wanted to go there, but he swears by Gage Keys. He thinks he's a good player. And then a couple of the mock, early depth charts I've seen has Amaris Williams, the big 5-star edge. I mean, starting from day one. Do you think that'll be the case next to big Kendrick Falk?
Possibly. I think if Amaris Williams is to start, they've got to move Keldrick Falk inside. And I don't think they want to do that. A big question mark about this team and about this defense is, can they rush the passer? They bring Jalen McLeod back, who really turned it on in the second half of the year. He kind of had an ankle injury to start the season. Once he got healthy, he was one of the better pass rushers statistically in the conference. And I think they want to make sure they can do everything they can for Keldrick Falk, the former 5-star, to take a step forward from that defensive end spot. So I don't think they'll scoot him in, Gordy. Maybe they will in pass rushing situations, but to me, the true freshman to watch that could come in and start right away is Malik Blockton. He's the younger brother of Marcus Harris, who's going to be an NFL draft pick in the coming months. But, a 4-star kid out of Pike Road, didn't get a whole lot of love because everybody knew he was going to Auburn this whole time. So his recruitment was pretty quiet, pretty silent. I had him on my show earlier this week. Very, very impressive mentally, really gets the game. And, just talking to some of the older guys in the locker room, they don't seem to treat him like he's a freshman. This is a guy who came in early. He was already a part of the bowl practices. And I'm getting texts from those practices afterwards saying, like, Malik Blockton, watch out for him. So I'm excited to see what he could do. To me, he's got a chance to start over Gage Keys as that 3 technique, that defensive tackle spot. That's a battle to watch this spring at Auburn.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, the mix they have of some veteran transfers coming in, but man, like your core of what you're going to build around. Hugh has said this, is that recruiting class, and they had such a talented class a year ago. This one was even better, takes a step forward, but it's like, what's the real, when you're playing a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds, what's the realistic expectations? Because you're going to go through growing pains and all that,
Yeah, but I mean, you can see what he's doing. Like, you can see the plan. And to me, internally, just both from an observation standpoint and just being told it, like, I think the plan is 2025. And of course, they want to win and do everything they can in 2024. But I think Auburn is a year away from being a legitimate challenger to make the college football playoff because of all these freshmen that we're talking about. This is a really good class. It's a really, really good class. And you mentioned the class before that wasn't ranked very high, but the guys they did flip over those last 7 guys that Hugh Freeze got, the month and a half that he had the job before signing day, your Keldrick Falks, your Kayan Lee, your Connor Lewis. Flipping all these guys was a big deal. And these are all guys who were expecting to start going into this season. So you can see what he's doing. It's just going to take time. And I hope Auburn fans are patient.
I'll just throw this one out at you because I got a DM from an Auburn fan last week asking this. Why wouldn't you then go, if that's the case, we're building for the future and it's all about youth, why wouldn't you throw a Walker White out there, start him as a freshman, let him get through his growing pains and knowing you'll have him down the road. Whereas, Thorne, he could be good this year, but he's gone after this. And then you're starting all over again with a new QB.
It's a reasonable question. And the answer is they want to win now. They want to win in 2024. And I mean, just think about it. If Auburn's quarterback play was a little bit better, I'm not saying he needs to be a top 5 quarterback in the conference, but if he was the 8th best quarterback in the SEC last year, I think Auburn beats Bama. Auburn, maybe if they could score one more time against Georgia, they beat Georgia at home a year ago. New Mexico State, you don't overlook them. And all of a sudden, Auburn's a 9-3 team with a chance to beat Ole Miss at home as well. Like, they weren't that far away, Gordy. They really weren't that far away. And so if you're Hugh Freeze and you're going to be more involved in the offensive game plans, like can the situation that you've built around the quarterback and then Hugh Freeze being more involved in the offensive game plan, can that get you more wins? And I understand why they think the answer to that is yes.
It's they've made some great additions this offseason on the coaching staff. We're going to talk about that next. Still more to come here on Locked On SEC and Locked On Auburn crossover edition, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day.
Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the best place to find a qualified candidate. Right now, you could do it for free. When hiring for your small business, we know how difficult it is because there's a million things a small business owner has to do. Well, LinkedIn Jobs, they have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Hiring is easy with LinkedIn Jobs when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That's a day. That's very quick to find a qualified candidate. So LinkedIn, they know that small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have the time or resources to hire. They have you covered. You can post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
One more segment here with our buddy Zach Blackerby as a crossover edition, Locked On SEC, Locked On Auburn. And we're continuing our spring previews and spending this whole episode in Auburn, Alabama. And Zach, as we look at Auburn, we talked about the roster additions. We talked about year 2 of Hugh Freeze. But man, as we know, there's been a lot of change across the SEC, not just with a lot of new head coaches, but a lot of new assistants. It's crazy. Somebody was pointing out to me, they're like, go look around the SEC and find me an OC or a DC that was in that same job 4 or 5 years ago. You can't find it. The turnover is constantly happening across the conference. So 2 new coordinators for Hugh Freeze. One of them, both of them SEC veterans, but DJ Durkin, a name that a lot of folks are very familiar with, has been a good DC. It stops at Ole Miss and at Texas A&M. He comes in to run the defense. Derek Nix comes over to be the OC. We'll see how much, Hugh Freeze is running the offense versus Derek Nix, but talk to me about the new OC and DC.
Yeah, we'll start with DJ Durkin. I mean, obviously, he was able to do a lot at Texas A&M, but he had, players that were rated higher than pretty much everybody he was coaching up against. So what does that translation look like? We will see. I think Auburn should expect a lot of DJ Durkin because of what they're going to be able to have on the back end. I mean, he's coached from a position coach standpoint. He's been all over the place, but seems like his core thing is linebackers. So I'm excited to see what he can get out of Eugene Asante, Dorian Mausi, the transfer from Duke that we haven't brought up yet. And then Austin Keys, the former Mississippi State linebacker. He played for DJ Durkin. So obviously he's going to be excited, and he's a vocal leader of this defense already. So excited to see what that looks like. And then obviously, you mentioned on the offensive side of the ball, Hugh Freeze has made it clear that he wants his dudes, his dudes around him. He wants to trust his staff. And, he trusts Coach Nix. And they've worked together a long time ago, and they wanted to work together again. And this kind of seemed like the natural next step for Derek Nix. He's been at Ole Miss for a long time. And so Hugh Freeze wants to go out and get guys that he trusts. And then also, Derek Nix is going to be able to recruit the state of Mississippi very well, which is crucial geographically for what Auburn needs to do to succeed. So I think they both make a ton of sense, and I'm excited to see how they translate to Auburn.
Any of the other assistant coaching moves? I mean, Charles Kelly comes very, highly touted, been at Alabama, been a bunch of places. Wesley McGriff coaching the secondary. There's a lot of different new coaches in there, but anybody excite you?
Yeah, I mean, Charles Kelly, seen nationally as one of the best recruiters in all of college football. And so I think it took Auburn too long to get Charles Kelly back here. So hats off to Hugh Freeze for doing that. I think that is going to be that's going to be big. They lost Jeremy Garrett, the defensive line coach, who I thought really, really pushed Auburn's defensive line a year ago to be a little bit better than they probably were. They lost him to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it was so late in the coaching carousel process where then they may have done this anyway, Gordy, I don't know, but they promote Vontrell King-Williams, who was the assistant D-line coach, kind of off-field analyst role. And all the players adored him. They all loved him. Hugh Freeze kind of hinted at that at his presser on Thursday when he was asked about Vontrell. He's like, this is who the players wanted. And so that's who they went out and got. And I mean, the players seem to respect him a ton too. So Vontrell King-Williams is a guy that Auburn could have gotten lightning in a bottle with him. There's just a lot of good energy around him. So that's a guy. And then just another note, and this is not ever going to be anything that's brought up a ton, but I'm just telling you, them going and getting Will Redmond from LSU was a really big hire. He's going to be their GM, and that's going to be a move that was, I don't know, it's going to fly under the radar, Gordy, but I think you'll agree with me. I mean, he was pretty effective with what LSU was able to do as far as bringing in Jaden Daniels and LSU constructing a roster to help LSU win the SEC West a few years ago.
Yeah, no doubt. And I've heard nothing but very good things about him. Last thing, Zach, is we're in the midst of spring ball. What's the biggest question for you? And I mean, it could be something we already touched on, but what's the biggest question for you about this Auburn team as they prepare for their spring game?
Yeah, I mean, the quick one I'll say is pass rush. It's just, they got to do it. They've got to figure out how to do that, whether it's winning one-on-one matchups or DJ Durkin creating some sort of scheme. They've got to be better at rushing the passer in 2024. And then, what does the offense look like? Is this really Hugh Freeze's offense? Is it a mixture of him and what Derek Nix want to do? Or are they so aligned offensively that they're going to be able to create kind of a similar vision, a similar idea on offense? And can Peyton Thorne execute it? I've heard good things from Peyton early on in spring camp. This whole RPO system, timing is crucial. Decision-making is crucial. Accuracy is crucial. Can Peyton Thorne pull it off?
And the last thing I just wanted to touch on with you very quickly as we look at the schedule. Look, there are 4 non-conference games. You get Cal at Auburn this year. Alabama, A&M, New Mexico, and UL Monroe. You should win all 4 of those. I get it. They lost a non-con. They had no business losing a year ago.
Thankfully, it's New Mexico and not New Mexico State.
But we'll just say, for argument's sake, they win all 4 of those. I feel good about them beating Arkansas. That one's at home. Arkansas, Sam Pittman, I think is just dead man walking. I feel good about the home game against Vandy. So that's 6 wins right there, Zach. And we haven't really gotten into the thrust of the schedule. You lose LSU this year, you don't have to play them. You do have to go to Alabama still for the Iron Bowl, but and then you have to go to Missouri, to Kentucky, to Georgia. That's a pretty tough road trip. Although I do think Missouri maybe takes a little bit of a step back from where they were last year. They were fantastic last year. But you get A&M at home, you get Oklahoma at home. Feels like you can split one of those. So 7, 8 wins, is that kind of where we're looking at Auburn, with a ceiling of maybe 9, 10 if everything goes great?
Yeah, I mean, I think if everything goes great, 10-2 is on the table, but you've got to have everything go great. And I think you probably need some other teams on your schedule to take a step back. Oklahoma is the most important game on this schedule for me, because you should be 4-0 and you host an Oklahoma team where if you can pull this off and win your first 5 games of the season all at home and start 5-0, you just got to believe in yourself a little bit. And I think Oklahoma is gettable. Oklahoma will host Tennessee, who will probably be a top 15 team in Norman. That's going to be their first SEC action. It's going to be a big deal for Oklahoma. And whether they win or lose, I think there's going to be emotional fallout from that game. And now they have to go in their first road SEC game into a Jordan-Hare Stadium that's already tough to win at if you're the visiting team. And Auburn's are probably going to be 4-0 unless they lose to Arkansas, which I don't think will happen. And to me, I just think everything points in Auburn's direction with that. And so if you start 5-0, like you said, Gordy, and you can win at Kentucky or beat Texas A&M at home, yeah, I think 8 or 9 wins is totally on the table.
Yeah, it's crazy too. We think also TV broadcasts, like, gone are the 2:30, 3:30 CBS games now. So, who knows? Oklahoma could be walking into a night game, at Jordan-Hare.
I think that's the same weekend as Bama, Georgia. And so you got to think that'll be the night game. So we'll see how all that impacts it.
But here's the thing that I was talking with somebody that works for ESPN about it. That could be the ABC game. Auburn, Oklahoma could be ESPN. It could be ESPN2. It could be SEC Network. There's so many avenues now that, again, we're going to get, you're not, the great games are not going to be that afternoon anymore. They're going to be all at night, and you're going to have some really, really good ones. So
I'm for it. I'm all for that. Absolutely.
See how it works. He is Zach Blackerby, of course, host of Locked On Auburn, does a fantastic job, and appreciate you guys tuning in and checking out this crossover edition. You checked out this show for your first listen. Hopefully you check out either Locked On Auburn or Locked On SEC for your second listen. And Zach, I'm sure you'll have plenty of stuff going here these next couple of weeks with more Auburn coverage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We got a lot of player interviews this week to kind of fill in the gap as the players are on spring break. But yeah, we'll hit the ground running again next week, of course, with more spring training.
And while you guys are at it, for another listen, you can go check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on our YouTube channel with all of our great national shows covering all of the great different sports with our local Locked On experts. He's Zach Blackerby. I'm Chris Gordy. Thank you guys for making us your first listen. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. Come on back, everybody. Make us an everydayer.